Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the channel. You thought I was done for the week? It's the NFL playoffs. I got content dropping all the time, not only for NBA and PGA with the PGA starting up, but the NFL as well. I mean, we got the 4-game slate, we got the showdown slates covered, and we even got the Sunday 2-game slate. Look, I'm looking at these slates, I'm saying, you know what, well, people care about the content, and then I see there's a $250,000 to first prize pool for the 2-game Sunday slate. Yes, people are going to care. I care at that point. So we're here breaking down the 2-game Sunday slate. Things are different. Look, it's not just take what Sal said or take what I think about the 4-game slate and translate it. No, the salaries are different. There's less teams, obviously, on the slate cut in half. So now some of those players who might be cheap and maybe there's 6 points on a 4-game slate didn't matter. Those 6 points on a 2-game slate, if they're cheap enough, it matters a lot because it'll let you pay up and get to where you have to get. So we're going to break down this slate like we usually do. We're going to do it by position: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and after that, it'll be brief, right? It's just a 2-game slate, but there's going to be some more players that are of interest to me, some guys that I wouldn't even think about on a 4-game slate that now I will start to think about because of their salaries at the wide receiver and tight end position, and there's just different salaries in general, so we will go through it once again here on the audio version, the podcast. Yes, there is a podcast version. We have about around 500 to 1,000 people listening per episode, how those ears doing, and then on the YouTube channel where I have this goal of reaching 20,000 subscribers by the Super Bowl. It is possible. It is going to be right up against it. We're going to need a little bit of extra of a push. So please do hit that subscribe button. I have a ton of just sponsorships, some money extra to give away. So with that, a couple of giveaways. One, to try and urge some more subscribers on the audio version and here on YouTube to hit that goal. Hit the subscribe button. Let me know who's your favorite wide receiver play on this slate below $5,000. On this 2-game slate favorite play, you will be entered into a chance to win $20. You must be a subscriber, must have the notification bell hit. If you're listening on the audio version, you could enter by leaving a review or coming to the YouTube channel. And also, if you head over to my Instagram before the end of the weekend, so Monday morning, I will find all of my Instagram followers. By the time I publish this video, probably Saturday, I don't know, sometime Saturday I'll publish this video, maybe Friday, and all the way up until Monday. Whoever I have Instagram followers during that time, I'll have a raffle for a $20 giveaway, so be sure to enter into that. I have another giveaway on my showdown video for the Saturday slate if you've already watched that or not. Depending on when you get into that, you can have another chance for the $20 giveaway. So with that all said, I'll have a $20 giveaway if you follow me on Instagram right now. Easy to do, linked up in the description. Takes no time at all, helps my social status a little bit. But then also if you leave a comment, and the big thing, hitting the subscribe button and notification bell, favorite wide receiver below 5K. I have Patreon exclusive content. I have a ton of people subscribed over on Patreon for not only just NBA, NFL till the end of the year, past the Super Bowl. Even after that, I'll be doing updates on Patreon in the offseason, the draft, the preseason, look aheads for next year, all of that, but also PGA as well. So there's PGA content there. So check that out. That's my Patreon exclusive content linked below. Those are the plugs. 2-game slate, $250K to first on this 2-game slate. So I guess some high level things for the 2-game slate to keep in mind. You can late swap. There are 2 games. So the second one, it's interesting to load up on the first one and then maybe swap into a lot of the pieces of the second game. I like that strategy. You don't have to force it, but if you're liking a lot of pieces in the first game, feel free to get a ton of them, and then whatever doesn't work out for you, or if it does work, just late swap onto the chalk in the second game. And then also be conscious of leaving money on the table. Be conscious of, if you're playing a tournament, not playing all the obvious plays, right? All the Michael Thomases are fine to play, but if you're playing them with every single obvious option, because you probably can easily get them in your lineup and spending all your money, your best outcome is probably to tie with like 100 and 200, 300 people. So the idea of winning 250K isn't on the table for you if you're spending all your money probably on this slate. You're probably more so looking at something that's nice, maybe a couple thousand, maybe 10,000, but it's nowhere near the same based on the upside of how many people are in that contest. So starting it out with quarterbacks, Russell Wilson, he's a maybe for me on this slate. Look, he's expensive. He's in a good spot, right? Philly ranks 21st against coverage. He goes for over 20 yards per game. And also his wide receivers, Lockett in the slot, great matchup. Metcalf on the outside. I love the matchups for his wide receivers, but Philly ranks 6th in pass rush. His offensive line is absolutely abysmal, dealing with injuries all season long, and really coming into the year, it was a unit that was doing better as of last year, the second half, but not so much gelling even after the offseason. Injuries hurt that. It's nothing against him. You can see I have no nose on these 4. I think they're all in play on this slate. I think they all have some sort of upside. But coming into the road in Philadelphia, I like that he's an underdog. He's going to have to throw more than his 31.8 times per game. But he's a maybe because these next 2 guys are just cheaper. One's a lot cheaper, and I like their upside. So Drew Brees in the highest team total on the entire slate. A little bit of a slower paced game, but a team total of 28 points. The next closest team total is 4.5 points lower. That is the Eagles. So when you're looking at Russell Wilson, he has a 5.5 point lower team total, a touchdown less. That's impactful. Drew Brees is facing a bottom 5 outside cornerback coverage play by Minnesota. He has a deadly red zone offense in terms of throwing the most in the slate in the red zone. He's throwing 40 times per game. He's not my primary option. We're about to get to this on that slate, but at 6,500, I give him the edge to Russell Wilson. I just think he's going to end up throwing around 10 more times in this game, and his team is implied to score an extra touchdown or so. Carson Wentz is probably the guy I like the most in this slate just because he's cheap. He's 6,000. Second highest team implied total at 23.5. This is the faster pace game of the two. He's throwing 43.8 times per game over the last 5 games. And now you face a Seattle team that, even if Miles Sanders comes out and is healthy, he hasn't practiced yet this week, but even if he's healthy for the weekend, you face a team that is going to come out and be a top team against the run, or a lot better against the run than they are against the pass. They're 30th in pressure. They have a lot of defensive line injuries right now that don't affect the running game as much, but they're 15th in coverage. So if you're going to attack Seattle, you attack them through the air. They allow the 5th most yards per game this season to quarterbacks at 275.4. And then also, not to mention, Lane Johnson's going to be questionable, still limited in practice, but the Eagles do come in with him projected in the number 1 pass blocking advantage on the slate by a wide margin at plus 29%. It's a spot where Carson Wentz shouldn't really face any pressure. That's going to be huge when you consider his weapons are likely to be, again, without Nelson Aguilar, the top receiver, Greg Ward. Zach Ertz should be back for this one. He just has to clear, but he's been limited in practice. I like Carson Wentz the most. The biggest thing is factoring in $6K price tag. If you're going to get 40 pass attempts for $6K and a nice team total, it's hard to ignore. Kirk Cousins is the closest to a no for me. Look, I mean, you're playing on the road against a top 6 New Orleans defense, a top 5 pass rush. You have the lowest implied team total at 20. Your team obviously thrives through the ground game. You're throwing around 30 times per game with a banged up, getting healthier Adam Thielen. And then Diggs, who will likely see a lot of Marshawn Lattimore shadow treatment. It's just not a fantastic spot. Your 8-point road underdogs right now. I have the information there. 8-point road underdogs versus top 5 New Orleans pass rush. And Kirk Cousins hasn't made a lot of mistakes. I mean, very much limiting the turnovers. But when you factor in a lot of what's actually happening here for Cousins, it's relying on the run. It's not being needed. And even when he is needed, he'll throw for 200, 250 yards, touchdown or two. It's not like he has the big game upside. So he's only 5,900. Keeps him in play in the slate. But if you're playing one lineup, it's really hard to, even in this price range, consider Cousins over Wentz, in my opinion. He is the closest, and I'll put him right now as a no, the closest to a no. Once again, as you can see right here, before we keep going, please do follow over on Instagram, $20 contest you can get entered into. Next up, as I make this a little bit bigger, there we go. So, next up, running backs. Dalvin Cook and Alvin Kamara. They're the obvious choices, right? Without a doubt, they are the obvious locks that if you're playing cash, get them in there, get different elsewhere. If you're playing GPPs, everybody is going to be stacking these two guys. They're the 2 best running backs on the slate in tiers of their own. Tier 2 in terms of talent, there probably is nobody in there. Tier 3 is when you get to Miles Sanders if he's healthy. And then you probably got 3 more tiers until you get to like Latavius Murray and Marshawn Lynch's skill sets at this point. So Dalvin Cook at the top. I do prefer Kamara, but Cook, New Orleans ranks 4th against the run, but Dalvin Cook's projecting out right next to Kamara. He projects out as my highest on running back, but right there in terms of they're like a point apart for me, so they're both very good plays. He has 42 red zone rushing attempts. That's with missing the final 2 games of the year. That would put him right around the Zeke territory for the end of the year. Zeke led the league in red zone attempts. At the running back position, he's averaging 4.5 targets per game. When you factor in his rushing attempts, he's averaging the most touches on the slate at over 22 per game. It's a great spot. Now, he's an 8-point underdog, lowest team total. Those are the spots that start to get iffy. If you were to fade one of these top-end running backs, I would fade Cook, but he's going to get all the red zone work. He's probably going to see, as an 8-point underdog, 6 to 7 targets in this one. It seems like he's expected to play, so the injury news shouldn't be a concern. I like him here. I just like Kamara more. I think he's the one that you could fade at the highest price point of $7,800. Alvin Kamara at 7,400 on this type of a slate, 2-game slate, he's probably going to be like 70 or 80% owned. I mean, he should be at 7,400. Minnesota's the number 1 tackling team, 10th in run defense, but they're going to probably be without Kendricks. We'll see as the week goes on. He did not practice for Minnesota on Tuesday or Wednesday. He got hurt in the Packers game. He's a really important piece of their run stop as a linebacker, as well as pressure. 7.3 targets per game for Kamara. When you factor in his rushing attempts, he's getting over 20 overall opportunities per game, and he has the best run blocking advantage on the entire weekend, let alone the 2-game slate. And he's only getting stuffed 13% of the time, lowest for any running back. We've seen the 4 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. That regression finally came. Kamara is the best running back playing the slate. Even in GPPs, if you're going to take a stance on him, you either play him at 100% or you play him at probably 0%. If you're entering like 150 lineups, you should try and get a little bit different. But if I'm entering 150, I'm going to play 100% of him. If I'm entering like 1 to 5, you make a chance. Do you play him in all 5 or you just fade him completely? I wouldn't just get like 50% of him because that doesn't really do you any good. in GPPs. Miles Sanders did not practice Wednesday, but if he's active, he's cheap enough on a 2-gamer to definitely be a yes. If he's out, I'll go to Boston Scott. Right now, I don't have any interest in Boston Scott at 5,400. If Sanders is active, yeah, Scott's been great. A lot of the work last week came when Sanders got hurt. But if Sanders is going to be active, Jordan Howard active for a couple of touches in this game, it's just so much easier to pay for Sanders at a similar price than Boston Scott. I'm not going to look at the small sample of the Week 17, the Week 16, the performances where Sanders left in Week 16 and then definitely left in Week 17. It's a spot where Sanders at 6,200, if he's active, Seattle's run defense is good. He is a secondary interest for me. He's the third most expensive running back. So if you were to fade Dalvin Cook and get a Kamara Sanders, I don't think it's terrible. He's going to be active in the passing game, but it's a spot where they're not underdogs. They're slight home favorites. They don't have to force Sanders into the receiving game as much as ground and pound on the ground. So he's definitely in play because of the big play upside, and I would probably project him around 16 touches if he's active. And if he is active, I would project Scott around 10 to 12. And I just don't want to pay 5,400 for Scott at 10 to 12 when Marshawn Lynch and Travis Homer, specifically Lynch because he'll have the goal line work, is cheaper and probably going to be more securely in place for 12 to 15 touches, I would imagine. His only downside is it's a close spread, just a 1-point spread, but he's on the road against Philadelphia's run defense that only gives up 69.6 rushing yards per game. So for me, those Seattle backs, I prefer Lynch. I think they're going to have the similar role, 12 to 15 touches each. They'll probably split 25 carries or so, maybe even 30, depending on how much Seattle runs in this one. But the upside for Lynch is when they get around the red zone, he'll get all of those carries compared to Travis Homer. So I go to Lynch there. If you're going down a little bit more, Latavius Murray on a 2-game slate, I think he has to be in play, but it's not high upside. Again, I prefer Lynch. He's 4,900. He's only seeing 8.3 touches per game over the last 4 games. If you don't count week 17, because he had 17 rushing attempts in that game, but Kamara only touched the ball, I believe, 11 times. Once the blowout ensued in really the first quarter, the Saints sort of wheeled back Kamara and Thomas, especially in the third and fourth quarter where Murray got a lot of his work. So I think more times than not, you're going to see Kamara touch the ball 18 times or so in this game. You probably see Latavius Murray touch it between 6 to 8, on a good day 10, but you can secure in for $200 more, 12 to 15 touches for Marshawn Lynch and red zone responsibility. So just give me Marshawn Lynch over Latavius Murray. Murray's in play, but not a ton. Don't want Alexander Mattison. He'll likely come back at 4 or 5 touches behind Dalvin Cook, but again, an 8-point road favorite against the top 5 run defense. Jordan Howard will only become interesting at 4,400 if indeed Sanders is out, but then I do prefer Mike or Boston Scott. So in this order, I would probably rank the running backs this week as Kamara, Dalvin Cook, Miles Sanders if he's healthy, Marshawn Lynch, and Boston Scott. That's where I would go. If Miles Sanders is out, Boston Scott would jump into number 3, Lynch would stay at number 4, and then I'd probably go to Latavius Murray and Howard as the 5th guy. So it's very obvious where you go at running back this week. You go to Kamara and Cook, unless you want to get different, which I think you can. Then you get off of Cook as an 8-point underdog, and you go to a guy like Marshawn Lynch. You take a stance hoping that he gets in the end zone. Moving over to wide receiver. So far, wide receiver for the week. Once again, be sure to follow over on Instagram and let me know who's your favorite play, your favorite wide receiver. I don't know what the option was. What did I say? Favorite wide receiver option below on the slate. Let's just say in general on the slate. You have the only guy not on the slate, let's say without Michael Thomas. So below the $7,000 Tyler Lockett, who is your favorite wide receiver play? Comment that down below. If I said something else at the beginning, I think that's what I said. Just change it. That's what I said for the 4-game slate video. So that you have to be a follower, a subscriber here, and you also have to hit the notification bell to be entered into a $20 raffle giveaway. Michael Thomas, 9,300. You might have to lock him in, but here's the deal. If you get to Kamara, if you get to Dalvin Cook, if you get to Thomas, you're spending a lot of money. You have to pay down elsewhere at wide receiver, so this is where you have to start to get different. I prefer Michael Thomas over everybody on the slate, over everybody. I'd rather have Thomas than Kamara. I'd rather have Thomas than Dalvin Cook. I'd rather have Thomas than Zach Ertz, right? Some of the other expensive guys like Lockett at wide receiver. He's the number 1 wide receiver by far on the weekend, probably in the entire league in terms of fantasy, definitely in terms of fantasy. And he's against Xavier Rhodes, where he has the best matchup on the entire weekend and probably the best matchup you'll ever see in the playoffs for a wide receiver versus a cornerback. It's hard to find a better one. Xavier Rhodes is bottom 15 in all categories, bottom 10 and bottom 5 in a lot. 127.8 rating against this season is abysmal, and Michael Thomas comes in with a positive 32% advantage. This is weighing his already great skill set, and he still has a 32% advantage compared to average here. You know what that means? This means that Michael Thomas, it's going to be damn near really hard for him not to be dropping a 30 to 35 point fantasy point performance on a 2-game slate. Hard to pass that up. On a 2-game slate, Michael Thomas is a virtual lock for me. Tyler Lockett, great matchup. It's just hard to prioritize. If you're going to go to Michael Thomas and like I probably lock him in, well, now you're starting to choose between your Tyler Lockett's and your Alvin Kamara's. I prefer Kamara over Lockett, but I would prefer Lockett over Dalvin Cook in this situation. Look, they're going to be passing the ball 31 times per game is what Russell Wilson throws right now. I think he throws a little bit more than average, around 35-40. Maddox in the slot, positive matchup for Lockett. I like him. The Minnesota wide receivers are both secondary interests. I might choose Thielen. He played 90% of the snaps the last time that he actually suited up against the Packers. They rested most of their starters week 17. I think all of them for the most part. So Thielen, he played 90% of the snaps. Now he has 2 weeks off. I think he'll be healthy here. He sees just about 5 targets per game. But if you're going to see an increased passing volume since they're 8-point underdogs, let's just say instead of 30 times per game, Cousin throws 40 times, right? A 25 or a 33% bump. I think that Thielen sees a direct bump as well there, and I think you end up seeing Thielen getting around 7 targets in this one. At 6,200, I like that. He'll be in the slot a lot more. He doesn't primarily go there, but he'll move into the slot when they don't do a lot of 2 tight end sets, and that'll let Stephon Diggs actually move around a little bit, maybe get away from Lattimore more. So I think Diggs will avoid Lattimore for 30% of this game or so, which is not great, but that 30% of the time they'll probably take some shots at him. He's 6,300. I slightly prefer Thielen. Both secondary interests. My third interest, that is a yes. So right now, Thomas and Lockett are yeses. Diggs and Thielen are maybes, but they're in a player pool. But I like DK Metcalf a lot. Rasul Douglas and or Mills will be guarding him, depending on how healthy Mills is. Douglas, it'll be a good matchup. Mills, it'll be a fine matchup. He has 20 pounds on Douglas. He has weight advantage over Mills as well, and this is important because this is a red zone wide receiver who leads all rookies in end zone targets. He's very much involved in the offense. At 5,900, he's cheaper on this 2-game slate than he is on the main slate, and that's wrong in my opinion. I like DK Metcalf a lot. Greg Ward is also cheaper on the 2-game slate, 21 receptions on 30 targets in the last 4 games. I think you can get to Greg Ward and feel really confident about that when he starts to get down this cheap. It's a spot where you're locking in 30 routes out of the guy. As long as Aguilar's out, you're probably locking in somewhere around 7 to 8 targets with upside there. With Zach Ertz practicing, not yet cleared, but being back, it does hurt his upside for touchdowns in the red zone. Ertz just a red zone monster with Goddard, but it at least gives you some upside. Even if Greg Ward had 7 targets, caught 4 or 5 of them for 40 yards, that's a really good score on a 2-game slate. At 5,000, you secure those 9 to 10 fantasy points. Nelson Aguilar did not practice on Tuesday or Wednesday. Doesn't seem like he's going to play. If he is active, I do prefer him for 4,500 over Greg Ward. I think he jumps into a full-time role as well. They just need this guy in the playoffs. I don't want the Saints receivers outside of Michael Thomas. Tre'Quan Smith over the last 6 games has 2 receptions per game for 24 yards. He does have 4 touchdowns over those 6 games. He is actually very much involved in the red zone. So if you wanted to try and take a chance on who's going to score the touchdown outside of Michael Thomas or Kamara at the wide receiver position, it would be Tre'Quan over Ted Ginn. He is being used in the red zone, but again, just 2 receptions per game over the last 6 for 24 yards. He would be a guy that, you know what, I'll put him as a maybe on this small slate. He's so expensive for his role. If he doesn't score a touchdown, he's killing you. Even if he scores a touchdown, it's like a 1-catch game for 11 yards and a touchdown, and that's not great, but at 4,000, 2-game slate, I'll put him as a maybe. Ted Ginn, I don't want any of. Over the last 6 games, 1.3 receptions per game for 18.5 yards per game. That's abysmal. Busy Johnson, when both Diggs and Thielen are active, he only runs about 10 routes per week. David Moore is interesting to me at 3,400 for Seattle. Look, there's no Josh Gordon. Over the last 2 weeks with no Josh Gordon, he's taken on the clear wide receiver 3 role. He battled injuries earlier in the year, David Moore, but now he's the clear wide receiver 3. With no Gordon there. 44 routes run the last 2 weeks. He has 4 targets, 3 catches, 51 yards. He's a deep threat option, and compared to Malik Turner, who's the wide receiver 4 now, ran just 19 routes the last 2 weeks. He's $3,400. I'm not expecting much. I'm literally expecting David Moore to catch 1 to 2 balls for probably around 20 yards. At the end of the day, you want the touchdown there. He's going to run, 20 to 25 routes in this game. It's a $3,400 price tag. It's not a lock by any means, but I'm not shocked to see David Moore catch a touchdown when you're running that many routes in a good matchup. So $3,400, he's the cheapest I'd go at wide receiver. This is a guy who on the 4-game slate, I have no interest in. On a 2-game slate, if he gets you 8 points at $3,400, that's huge. Let's move over to tight end. I don't have really any other interest. I will mention Robert Davis because he ran 33 routes last week for the Philadelphia Eagles. No catches on 2 targets. The week before that, he ran routes. He's ran more routes than Arcega-Whiteside over the last 2 weeks. He caught 1 ball for 1 yard on 6. For 1 ball on 1 target for 6 yards in week 16. 33 routes run is important. He's only 3,200. Could be a sneaky play if Aguilar's out again. So those guys in the 3K range, in David Moore and Robert Davis, not a lot of upside, right? We know that. We're just trying to look for diamonds in the rough here. Those would be the guys I would go to the most. Finally, tight end. I will also announce that up above, I will link up right now. I do have Patreon exclusive content. The NFL all the way up to the Super Bowl, PGA, NBA, all that stuff. I'm an independent content creator. Spend about close to 100 hours a week on this stuff for YouTube and Patreon and guest appearances and projecting business expenses, but also just business future goals, things like that. So I do appreciate if you want to support me over there. Even if you don't want the content, you can leave donations. Going to tight end. If Zach Ertz is active, you get to Zach Ertz. He's one of two guys that I have a lot of interest in this week. Look, limited participant Wednesday. He has to be cleared for practice or to play. As long as he's cleared, he'll be good to go, but we won't know that until maybe by the time we're seeing this video. If he is cleared, he is dirt cheap. He is $5,400 on a 2-game slate. He is a virtual lock. I like another guy a lot too, but he's just so cheap at $5,400. Number one tight end if he suits up. If Zach Ertz suits up, I don't really care about getting to Dallas Goedert. At the same price point, I think Ertz just sees more times than not 2 to 3 more targets, a lot more red zone usage. He's going to be a yes for me, Goedert, if Ertz is out, though, at this price tag. Jared Cook, it's a brutal matchup against Anthony Harris, who led the league in interceptions with 6. You're seeing Jared Cook about 5 targets per game. I'm projecting him for that, 4.9 to be exact, is his targets per game. I probably lean more towards a no with Jared Cook, but it's only because this next guy's very interesting. I mentioned Josh Gordon the last 2 weeks has not been playing. You've seen 74 routes run for Jacob Hollister over the last 2 games without Gordon. Now, obviously, they had to throw a lot more against San Francisco. He got tackled at the 1-inch line, and they lose the game. But I'm projecting him for 5.5 targets here. He's seen 13 over these last 2 weeks, so about 6.5. Maybe I'm a little bit low. Maybe I should bump it up to 6, but second worst matchup on the weekend, but it's a brutal matchup for Jared Cook as well. Right behind Zach Ertz, if he suits up this week for me, is Jacob Hollister. If Ertz is out, I prefer Hollister as my number 1 tight end on the 2-game slate, probably slightly ahead of Dallas Goedert. The rest of these tight ends don't stand out to me. Kyle Rudolph, just 36 routes run in weeks 15 and 16. These guys really did not play in week 17. 5 targets during that span. Irv Smith, I would prefer over Rudolph for $800 cheaper. He's actually ran 5 more routes over the last weeks 15 and 16 when the starters played, and during that time he had 6 targets in those 2 weeks. Irv Smith, Kyle Rudolph, you're banking on touchdowns. I'd rather pay for the cheaper one in Irv Smith. If Zach Ertz is out, it actually does make Joshua Perkins, who I currently have as a no, it would make him a yes. I'll actually walk back what I said earlier. If Ertz is out, I'll have Joshua Perkins as my number 1 tight end above Jacob Hollister. Hollister second, Dallas Goedert third, because Perkins is so cheap. He's $2,900. He ran 33 routes last week when Ertz was out, and he was using the slot and out wide primarily. He was primarily used as a slot wide receiver and an out wide receiver. If Zach Ertz is out, he is the number 1 tight end on this 2-game slate because he is so cheap. So, thank you for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. This content, I love doing it. It's the first week of the NFL playoffs, and I'm dropping a ton of it. Not only on Patreon, where we'll have some exclusive ownership shows throughout the postseason, and also talking about my final thoughts, my exposures, but also here on YouTube. I did the 4-game slate, did some showdown slates, did this 2-game slate. Who knows what we're going to do next, but stay tuned, gang, whenever this video I decide to drop it. I really do appreciate you all. You all rock. The goal is to hit 20,000 subscribers by the Super Bowl. Please do hit the subscribe button. You'll be entered into a $20 contest giveaway if you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and drop down in the comments who is your favorite wide receiver play below the $7,000 price tag of Tyler Lockett. Also follow me on Instagram for a $20 contest giveaway, and then head over to Patreon. There's a lot of content over there as well, but you could also just leave a one-time donation if you think that you would like to support my content. That is all linked up down below in the description. You all rock. My name's Sal. Best of luck this weekend, gang. Best of luck if your team's still in the postseason. My Packers are, so a little bit of a bye this week. Gonna hang out. Peace out, gang. Appreciate y'all. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed that video above my head. If you're not already subscribed to this channel, I do ask you if you can please hit that subscribe button. Helps me out a good amount to reach more people. You can also follow me on Twitter. That's over there. Right in the corner is my @SalVetriDFS Twitter. And then above, you'll find my Patreon link. You can click on that if you want more exclusive content for me. Or a video is going to pop up, so why don't you check that one out as well. I think it's going to be beneficial for you. Thank you so much again for tuning in, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.